Kuzner on strike. There it is. They go. This will be out, surely. Oh, it's out. It's going to be run out. Oh, that's it. South Africa out. Donald didn't run. I cannot believe it. Australia go into the World Cup final. Ridiculous running with 2 balls to go. Donald didn't go. Kuzner come. What a disappointing end for South Africa. What a match for our viewers right around the world.
Welcome again to PCCI podcast. PCCI, the name, the full form that I forget all the time. So Nishant, can you tell us what is PCCI again?
Now that you have put me on the spot, Pot for Control of Cricket in India.
So today again, as you guys have been aware, Aditya is not with us because he's still trying to get that citizenship from Kailasa. So instead of Aditya, we have a guest on our show today. And our guest is the famous cricket broadcaster Raunak Kapoor out of the ESPNCricinfo fame. Raunak, first of all, before we get to you and get to do your introductions and stuff, let me just ask you this. बीसीसीआई जो बोर्ड का जो फुल फॉर्म है, बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल फॉर क्रिकेट इन इंडिया, बहुत ही आर्काइक और कॉन्वोल्यूटेड नहीं समझ पड़ता आपको?
So first I want to clarify that you guys picked me only because Aditya didn't get his citizenship. So if he would have got it, so then it would have just been the 3 of you again. So I'm standby. I'm back up.
So, you like Aditya is a luminary because just give me a minute to talk about Aditya. So Aditya is going to be the Amit Shah of Kailasa. So please.
Please don't give me. I can predict the next 55 seconds. So let me spare you the minute. If you've said that, then I don't need to hear anything more. And I'm very happy that he's not on this podcast in that case.
Having said that, अगर आप agree कर लो तो हम उसको ditch कर देंगे. We all 3 of us can do it from next time.
I mean, yeah, before our episode started, we were talking to you and you asked us about where we are from. And Aditya did not tell you that he's a native of Bombay. When I say native, he's from Kalyan. So he's mildly jealous of you as well. Yeah, exactly. So Raunak, I mean, we broadly know, we broadly know you and we know who you are, but I'd still like to get an introduction from you. But while you talk about yourself, I'd really want you to tell us about your relationship with cricket. When I say relationship, like as all of us as teenagers watching and growing, and something interesting that happened in our last episode with Amar was we asked the same question to Amar, and he talked about his cricket watching experience and compared it to Mohammad Asif's career, basically, where this guy came with this amazing, but like almost a love affair, and I found it very poetic. So I would, if and this is, I know it's a little difficult question, but if there is one Indian story of a cricket player that you almost feel like was this love affair that just couldn't happen. So, like your relationship with cricket before, like a mild introduction of yours.
Okay, wow, that's a lot to try and
Loaded
get
question,
out.
I know.
Very loaded, but let me try and address each one of it.
Yeah.
Firstly, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure, and this is very unique since you guys are joining me. I mean, you guys are getting me on a podcast that's in the US, which is a first for me. And I might do many podcasts in the US, but I won't get one where there's also a connection to Kalyan. So this is like very, very unique. This is as globalized a podcast as I'll ever be part of in my career. To answer your first intro on whether the BCCI itself is such an archaic name, yeah, I mean, it probably is. But what to do now? It's very hard for us to let go of bad habits. We rely on our history to teach us things, and then of late, whether it's cricket or beyond, we only end up making the same mistakes again and again. But quite frankly, I like it. I like the BCCI only because it's a little different. It's got such a character to it now. You know, it's got personality to it. When you say BCCI, automatically it will be associated with some news that is not necessarily productive to cricket. If you talk about Indian cricket, you will say the Indian cricket team. You will say India did well. But when you talk about the BCCI, you know, you're always thinking there's some jhamela, there's some nonsense that's going on, some BCCI office bearers being difficult, or that's why they try so hard. They keep the identity of the Indian cricket team, the BCCI handle on social media. You know, where you're trying to tag congratulations BCCI on this win, and everyone seems to be doing it. You know, England is ECB, Australia is CA, Pakistan is PCB. Everyone's trying their best to associate their board's identity with their team, because I think it's a natural. More fans around the world over the past few years have started dissociating the board with the team. So I think it's a desperate attempt for those that run cricket to try and be popular. But that's a conversation perhaps for a little later. As far as the name goes, I like it now because it's got a nice ring to it. If it wasn't BCCI, then it doesn't give you inspiration for your podcast name either.
Just to cut in for like
Sure.
so chote se when I was young, I remember I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I remember we used to call it cricket cricket control board of India. And it was still like MBBS के साथ है ना, like MBBS लिखते हैं पर फुल फॉर्म कुछ और है, वैसा दिमाग में आ जाता है. I don't know if it was always board of control for cricket in India somehow. I don't know, I'm
I
confused.
mean, you'll have
But
to
anyway,
take back a long way, but
yeah.
from my recent memory, it has always been BCCI since it's been established. If they refer to it differently in a different era, then that's another thing. But I mean, anyway. So yeah, to come back to the series of other questions that you put to me. So firstly, I joined the field of cricket broadcast while I was still studying. I used to be a law student at Government Law College, Mumbai, and that was only about 100 yards away from, 100 meters away from the local All India radio station there. And
Wow, convenient.
and the one beautiful part of a government-run law institution is that attendance is not mandatory, and they don't care. So, of my many free lectures and free days, one day I genuinely decided, it was actually after India Bangladesh game that I heard on radio, and I don't know how many of your listeners or you guys have ever heard All India Radio, which is actually it's got such an intimate relationship with Indian cricket from the very early eras.
But not after 2002, to be honest. Like the last I remember was the 2001 2 ODI series that we had with Zimbabwe, I guess. That's the last time that I heard. Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, but there will always be a story if you ask a generation before us, or even for those that have
Mhm.
been following cricket for at least more than 15 years, they will have a story connected to All India Radio, even if it's not a story connected to them directly. There are all these old tales we've all heard in cricketing with that families used to turn the TV commentary off and leave the radio on, when they used to watch cricket, and they still remember iconic radio broadcasters, whatnot. Anyway, so I used to listen to radio essentially while driving, and the standard of All India Radio's commentary. Now I'm part of it, so this is a little funny to admit. It is actually not that good. Some of the English commentary, you have a lot of these forced accents that come through on All India Radio. It's also filled with a lot of retired government officers that just nudge their buddies for a gig to cover cricket. So it was so bad one day when I genuinely heard an India Bangladesh game. The next day, I was just bored, frustrated, wasn't doing well at law school, and I just decided we'd go for a walk with a friend of mine, and we happened to walk past All India Radio. I said, you know what, we've got time. Let me go in and see if I can speak to someone in the sports section. And I actually went in, used a little bit of colloquial Marathi that I get away with in Mumbai, which makes me sound extremely localized. And I got a straight pass to the sports section of All India Radio Mumbai. And I happened to meet the sports section, who was a lady at the time who, her name is Ujjwala Srinivas. She's actually based in your part of the world now. And as it turns out, she entered, and I totally judged. At that time, I was a 21-year-old law student. I'm like, oh my God, this lady's been given charge of sport. What will she know? I
रौनक
genuinely
cancel हो जाओगे
had that
आप.
impression. And I know, that's what I'm trying to say. That this was, 7, 8 years back, we were all thinking all of this. Now we've been sensitized a lot better with how we view, people's opinions of the game. And this is All India Radio. It's a government. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to relate to her. And here she walks in, and she says, who are you and what are you doing here? And she smiles. I said, ma'am, I'm a student at the law college next door, and I've listened to All India Radio for a lot of years and all. I thought yesterday's
You
commentary
said
was really
pathetic.
pathetic. And my friends looked at me. Yeah, I used the word pathetic, and I should have said something nice. I should have said it was not very good, but it kind of just came out, right? And she started laughing, to my great surprise. And she says, "I agree. Our standards have dropped." And she sat me down. We spoke for an hour. She ordered a cup of tea. And from there it just kicked off, where she started talking about how we need people that are generally passionate about the game to take part in the broadcast of cricket a lot more. And All India Radio has always been one of those avenues, because the greatest broadcaster of our generation is Harsha, and
Mhm.
that's where he started. He's been an inspiration to so many of us, and that's where his journey began. Now imagine if there was no All India Radio, if there was no try and join the dots as to when Harsha Bhogle would have ever appeared or been part of the cricketing broadcasting scene. So it genuinely started luck by chance. I'm genuinely saying that when you do stuff like this, I was a law student. Most of the guys that work at CricInfo, which is again devoted to just passionate, hardcore cricket fans, 90% of them are either former engineers, former chartered accountants, former lawyers.
Yeah.
And I think even you guys, if I ask you what your day job is, it's going to have nothing to do with cricket. So that's just how, that's just how you end up in the sport. I'm very fortunate that I happen to be, I got an opportunity at the right time, and I found an organization that I could convert this passion into a profession with. And a number of people in my field are exactly like that. Jatin Sapru comes from an engineering background. Harsha himself is an ex-engineer and IMI, which the world knows. So I just think these kind of things, you're always going to have a fun story. You just have to be ready to give up other pleasures in order to make such a rewarding field a way of life for you. So that's genuinely how I got in with All India Radio first. After All India Radio, I wrote to CricInfo, to the editor-in-chief via Facebook, believe it or not. So I owe the digital age a lot. And this guy who never replies to emails, the editor-in-chief of CricInfo, his name is Sambit Bali. He's a lovely guy. He's just very forgetful. And he never replies to emails, but somehow at that time, replying on Facebook was the in thing to do. So he sent me he said, come see me. And, that's where it just goes from there. So you just take a chance and sometimes things work out. This will be my 7th year with ESPN. So I've had the privilege of covering the game, and that's how I'm connected here.
Have you been working with AIR since back then, or?
So when I joined CricInfo, I had literally given, it was a full-time job at the time, and when I was being hired, the only request I made was that in some way I owe All India Radio a lot, because they gave me a local sports show to do. That was the end of the conversation with Ujjwala Srinivas. I got a local Mumbai sports, Mumbai All India Radio sports weekly to do. She also got me to read the news every now and then because I was from the legal profession, and she didn't care that I had no media experience. I didn't come from a media school. So she was just this wonderful, open-minded woman who just wanted to give people with merit a go, purely on merit. And Sambit Bal turned out to be exactly that kind of person as well. So I've been fortunate to meet two people like that very early in my professional life. And the one thing I told Sambit was, when if All India Radio ever calls, I'd love to just answer that call. It's once in a while. It's not like radio's a full-time gig. Every now and then they'll call. If it's possible, I'd love to go. And Sambit was very understanding on it. So as it turns out, while I have been ESPN's in-house presenter in India for the last 7 years, over the last few years, whenever All India Radio call for a gig, more often than not, I say yes to it. So it's something that my company coexists and sort of allows and affords me to do, which is why I've also started doing commentary of late, ever since the BCCI rights went to All India Radio. So I present for ESPN and I do radio for Akashvani. Yeah.
Of course, mostly I would also like to know, growing up, how you watched cricket. And I don't mean TV with it. I mean like the joy and the poetry of it, and some specific, like when I gave you that.
Did you cry? Did you cry watching the TV in the 1996 semi-finals?
So as it turns out, I got my first taste of cricket was when I was 9, right? When I started watching cricket. I was playing cricket around before that, but I didn't really get onto watching cricket. So I'm actually born 1990, which is why my first bit of real cricket was 1999. And then it all goes backwards from there. Yes, from the World Cup to the following tour to Australia. And that's when I really started getting into it. It just so happened that was the time that, I watched a lot of cricket with my grandfather, who was one of those guys who used to record every India game on his VCR and watch it again. Full 50 over games. And, such was the lovely, simpler times that we lived in, that you didn't know what to do once the game was done. If you were a passionate cricket fan, today you could watch highlight after highlight, or you don't even have the appetite to watch a game again if you've already seen it. But this is the kind of man that I was usually influenced by. So I started watching. And my grandfather, funny enough, I used to ask him, why do you keep watching re-records, reruns again? So you see, that's how I remember cricket. And I like to talk about cricket with complete authority. He was one of those people. So I obviously I didn't have the same time as him. He was retired, and clearly I didn't have much to do in his retired life, so he kept watching cricket. I was one of those cricket geeks, cricket nerds that actually started writing scorecards in my own little book while watching cricket. So it was something that I did on the sly. I did it quietly. I could never admit to my friends or family that I did it because it was the worst. I mean, one of the worst admissions you could have. You sound like a complete loser.
Dude, I used to do it.
Yeah, so great. So here we are, right? And I used to have a lot of pleasure doing
I'm
it.
not only the weird one, so yeah.
Exactly. So as weird as it was, a lot of my memory draws back to the time that I actually started writing this. So today, if I am, I consider it a testament to the fact that I'm half decent at what I do, that I've still been in this profession for 7 years full time. But if I'm any good at it, it's if I have the ability to recall cricket, at least from the time that I started watching it and maybe a little before, is because I actually took to the game unwittingly as a diligent student. It was almost like, as it turns out, if I made it, at some point I wanted to have a career in cricket. I was never good enough to play, like many others. And the next best thing is to just be associated with it and talk about it. So for me, that's my most vivid story as I look back at it, that I took a chance and I invested myself entirely in something which at that time was either shunned or was considered to be a distraction, and focus on other things, focus on exams. Where is this ever going to get you? To think that if at that time you would have said, yeah, if I completely immerse myself in cricket, that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, I can be a cricket broadcaster, which is going to be good enough for me for the rest of my life. You would have taken that deal. So as far as watching cricket from those days, that's the time I started. And obviously it was a very interesting time for Indian cricket. The faith of the world of the country had been shaken with what happened in 99, 2000. New leadership came in. It was a dreadful tour to Australia that followed the World Cup. It was a very disappointing World Cup, firstly, and then at the end of the year, India were hammered in Australia. Then came the era of Ganguly, which in many ways you could consider as the cult era. Almost the attitude era, as the WWE likes to call that era in its wrestling. It became the attitude era.
Do you not follow Kartikeya Date on Twitter?
I stopped following Kartikeya Date.
I'm sorry. I just had to. Every time someone talks about Ganguly, someone talks about.
No. But my views on Ganguly are pretty much aligned with anyone who's watched Indian cricket closely. And let me just put it this way. Of course, I'm a big fan of that era of Indian cricket. But the legend of Ganguly one day shall be rewritten.
This is a very I don't know, like, because I know your job is like you work with CricInfo, and I'm assuming you're closely associated to BCCI. So I will say something and then you can validate or invalidate me.
So we aren't closely associated with BCCI. In fact, CricInfo was one of the biggest organizations that took on the board in 2013, ironically the year that I joined, when the IPL corruption scandal broke out and the handling of Srinivasan after that. So much so to a point that writers and reporters at CricInfo lost their accreditation. It was literally what this whole effect of speaking truth to power in a much smaller sense when it comes to the sport was felt by CricInfo, and has been felt a lot of times. It's not just the BCCI. When our guys have gone after Giles Clark and the ECB or Wally Edwards in Australia, we've literally had accreditations pulled, players refusing to give interviews to the outlet. So CricInfo remains a fiercely independent organization even today. And the only thing I would say to that is that the need to question the BCCI has significantly reduced in 2019. It was required a lot more about 5-6 years back.
So I mean, it's pretty evident, right, that the BCCI influences the commentators which are on air on TV for sure. Like even I think Ian Chappell said that he refused a gig once because there was just too much interference. I mean, do they do the same when you're doing it for All India Radio? Is it the same sort of?
So let me tell you this: the one absolutely wonderful thing about All India Radio has been how liberating and how completely unadulterated its content has been. There is nobody sitting on top of you telling you what to say, what not to say. Maybe to some degree, I don't know if this is whether the mainstream media does not include radio in India, right? In the eyes of a lot of people. And therefore, people don't care what's said on radio.
Yeah, radio is probably the mainstream.
Sure. But I'm saying if you are to tell somebody that though people went after MS Dhoni big time or went after Virat Kohli big time on All India Radio's post-match show, I don't think anybody would care about it, right? So that's perhaps a result of how All India Radio itself has failed to establish its relevance in these times. Obviously, it's a public-run enterprise and therefore it has its challenges. And also, radio is not a medium that's considered for its non-musical content in India as much. Now, digital radio has changed that. Now, podcasts have come back into the fact where suddenly people are looking for alternate entertainment, alternate commentary, alternate sources for their news and entertainment. They don't want the mainstream news anymore, the TV news anymore. But even then, AIR is still trying to establish a digital presence. It remains essentially a terrestrial radio feed which goes into the interiors of India. When I say interiors, I don't just mean tier 2 cities, but to places where still there isn't dish TV, or where there still isn't DTH connection, where there still isn't necessarily even internet at all places. That's where all India Radio still goes to. So that's the kind of, now from those platforms, if someone's going after the Virat Kohli or an MS Dhoni at a time when everyone was afraid to do so, in some ways perhaps the board didn't care, but that's sidestepping. The main issue I'm trying to bring out is, never has there ever been a diktat not to go after a player. The commentators had complete liberty to say whatever he or she wants. So in that way, it's been a wonderful medium, because it's exactly what radio should stand for. Radio is, according to me, and I think according to most listeners, far more liberating. Sometimes you have to be a lot more careful and cautious to what you say on the visual platform. But radio is something that should never have, should be no holds barred. And that's why the identity of radio has remained wherever it's been successful all over the world. So never had that problem with radio.
Like, something that really saddens me is so US has NPR, right? NPR is US government funded, and Trump is the president. Even then, most of NPR programming is heavily liberal, let me say, and therefore NPR is widely successful in US because people like to listen to NPR. NPR has some really quality content, whereas in India, I think we've had a difficult time, especially इससे पहले वो भी था, right? That if you had a private FM channel, you could not broadcast news on it. So then it went back to becoming just musical.
In one way, the fact that there are far stronger laws to protect media content in the
First
US
Amendment,
enables
the only thing.
The ecosystem under which, So exactly, you take the First Amendment away, and all of a sudden we're all looking at things very differently. So out here, I think that's what's missing, that even if you do want to have that platform to question your own bosses, for instance, and still get away with it because you will be protected by a robust media protection law and a judiciary to back it out, where both those things out here are, the entire dynamic is very different. So that's all I'd say on that point. But I get the point that it's great to have an organization that can, still allow for commentators to just say whatever they want to, because that's essentially what people do.
Exactly. And going back to what you said about Harsha and you guys are essentially broadcasters, and we've had great broadcasters. I mean, we, as in the cricketing fraternity globally, has had great broadcasters who've not played cricket. But over and over now, at least in the last 2 decades, we see that more ex-cricketers are coming into it. Even the ESPN CricInfo programming has a lot of ex-cricketers being part of it. So as a broadcaster, does it get difficult sometimes to build that kind of rapport, because they're not trained, right? They're just there because they played cricket. So does it get difficult?
It's a good question. So you brought up Ian Chappell a little while back, and he's considered to be a great sort of benchmark for no holds barred, honest analysis and commentary in cricket. Now, Ian Chappell you may not have always agreed with Ian Chappell, which is perfectly fine. His views on the T20 game and his views on certain things remain, with due respect to him, from an era that perhaps, or from a field which aren't as relevant anymore. But that having been said, Chappelli was one of the first people to say that it's a completely different skill set that you need to be successful as a broadcaster to be successful as a cricketer. And he had the highest regard for people that were able to, that were in a position to be good broadcasters because of the skill sets they possessed. Whether that was Tony Cozier, who he shared the commentary box with for a lot of time, who always saw the game as a journalist and a historian and a student of the game, and it became one of the most enjoyable voices to listen to, Tony Cozier. Harsha has, I can easily say, outdone all his peers in the BCCI commentary box in terms of popularity, in terms of social media following, in terms of market value. I mean, Gavaskar isn't on social media, so it's perhaps hard to compare the two in terms of who would be the bigger star. But maybe Gavaskar is the bigger cricketing icon. There's no doubt that Harsha is the bigger star. If you ever see Harsha walk around, if you watch Harsha walk in with a with Murli Karthik or even Sanjay Manjrekar, who's a good friend of mine, and Gavaskar, you'll find more people that would just want to take pictures and selfies with Harsha. So he is he's the biggest star. So that just goes to show that it doesn't matter how much you've played. To be honest, it goes down to whether you can establish a relationship with the listener, the viewer. It goes down to whether you can do an honest enough job of the what you've been given. And in fact,
Hmm.
I use Akash Chopra as a great example of someone who had a very modest career, but saw his broadcast. Saw the prospect of of his life as a broadcaster as a non-cricketer. He studied, he worked as hard as for it because he felt he didn't have the credentials as a cricketer, and that in many ways extends to a lot of us. All those who've not played, we always feel we have to work harder to make sure
Yeah.
we show that we're still part of the sport and we know what we're talking. Whereas I think most cricketers, even if they don't admit it
Hmm.
officially, I know some would. Sanjay would. I know he's admitted it even in public before. That cricketers take it too easy at times. They will just show up and say whatever they want because they enjoy the immunity of having played the game, and therefore whatever they say, even if they talk absolute
Can I say
garbage,
Ramiz
it
Raja?
sells. And
Can I
many
say
times
Ramiz
they do
Raja?
that. No, you look. We have. I'm sure every cricket loving fan will pick his commentaries and art.
Yeah.
It's subjective. People are not going to like and dislike the same guy. But I think the one thing we can all agree on is if you put in a non-cricketer in that position, if he says if he has the slightest faux pas, you're going to make an
Yeah.
absolute meal of the fact that he's not played and this is how bad he is. Whereas you could get Gavaskar or Ramesh Raja getting away with murder.
I mean, Sanjay, good to know that he has accepted this, but he kind of also did it just recently.
Absolutely, and I don't know if you saw my reaction. I did a video with
Yeah.
Sanjay just towards the end of the year, where in fact, as it turns out, we wanted to keep the chat to 10 minutes, but it actually went for almost 25 minutes. Where I poked him, I sort of provoked him even beyond that to ask him more on why he had that moment of where he let go and went after Harsha. Why did it become personal? Does he not value the opinion of a non-cricketer and whatnot? So I think there it just became Sanjay regrets the incident, and that video is there for everyone to see.
Hmm.
But he, for all his flaws, of which there are, I'm sure, in the eyes of a lot of listeners, many, because I know that, like I said, commentary is subjective. I have enjoyed listening to Sanjay Manjrekar in the past. I enjoy listening to a lot of what he says
Hmm.
in the present. And I also dislike a lot of what he says in the present, which, if it ever comes up, I certainly let him know. And he's actually a good sport of it. Now, he enjoys a good rapper with me, so he takes it. His equation with Harsha might be a little different at this time, even though they worked for 20, 25 years. And maybe that was a poor moment, but he's the first one to admit it. So, for all his flaws, his mere admittance to when he gets it wrong is, I think, a fairly decent, I would say, an example of his character. तो इतना भी बुरा नहीं है संजय मांजरेकर जितना लोग समझते हैं एंड क्यों शायद कमेंट्री इरिटेट करती हो लोगों को बट दैट्स ओके नाउ दैट आई थिंक देयर आर पीपल दैट हैव एंजॉयड लिसनिंग टू हर्षा ऑल दीस इयर्स दैट से अरे अभी बहुत इरिटेटिंग हो गया हर्षा I still think Harsha is one of the best broadcasters we've got, but I can understand somebody saying Harsha irritating हो गया है.
पिछले एक हफ्ते में Sanjay Manjrekar has earned a lot of my respect, by the way. In the
What
last
story was
1 week,
that?
he has earned my respect, Sanjay Manjrekar, because he seems to be the only,
अच्छा.
and this is something that, I mean, I guess this is the right time to just ask this. Basically, whatever is happening in India, and you've been pretty upfront with your own
Yeah.
political opinions on social media, at least, right?
Hmm.
Um, so we did talk, we have talked about this within ourselves, but like it seems like the current jingoistic nature of not just the regime but a lot of our people was almost pre-predicted
Yeah.
by the way BCCI acted in the 2000s and subsequently, right? So I'm sure as a broadcaster you must
Hmm.
have been around a lot of jingoistic, um, be it cricket or be it outside cricket, jingoistic narratives. Is it difficult to
Hmm.
kind of keep the liberal dispensation like, and when I say liberal dispensation, I'm not just talking about India, but I'm also talking about the fact that let's say BCCI should be more equitable when it comes to other cricket boards in ICC in terms of the money structure and all of that. So does it get difficult for you to be apolitical when covering a medium which is becoming increasingly political over time? If you remember, like something that I did not really enjoy at all was Indian cricket team wearing those camouflage caps during the Australia One Day series. So, like, how
Hmm.
has it affected you?
Yeah. Okay, so there are a lot of layers to the question that you asked. Let me try and address them without going on and on. And please
Please
stop me if you
talk as
think I'm
much as you
rambling.
want. We are all
Uh,
Vela right now.
the
Yeah.
the yeah. So the consumption, the consumption of cricket has changed as a viewer. I think in the last 4 or 5 years in particular, we all grew up watching cricket essentially in one language, which was English, which invariably had for a responsibility on the English broadcaster to be objective, be neutral to a large degree, because that broadcast went all over the world. Now, with the advent of regional commentary, this is what I put it down to over the last few years, where more and more cricketers have been asked to do Hindi. And now, of course, in India, Tamil is a huge medium. It's become a massive, and so too the other regional languages in the south. There are platforms in Bengali and Marathi that are being initiated now. And everybody started to jump in on it. Now, when you do a coverage in a regional language, you're automatically, the audience that you are catering to, and you automatically, as it's almost a prerequisite, at least from the channel's perspective, to be jingoistic. Right now, whether that comes naturally to you is another thing. That depends to the individuality of the commentator. But I know enough of the Indian commentators who will completely tailor their arguments separately for a world feed of the ICC or the BCCI, which is going to go all over the world, vis-a-vis the Indian, the regional commentary that you're going to get, or the Hindi commentary you're going to get, which was perhaps the first real, the limelight came on this when Harsha Bhogle and Amitabh Bachchan had that very public spat after the India-Bangladesh game, where Harsha tried to put out an explanation to Mr. Bachchan. God only knows why he had to do that. But anyway, he put it to Mr. Bachchan, saying that this is what we do on a world feed and this is what we do on a regional feed, where we're allowed to be a little more, partisan, and we can at that time start feeling hamari team har gayi. Yeah, you can express happiness when India does well and express sorrow when they don't. So what it's done now is this whole thing of shifting to regionals. It's made more and more listeners either advertently or inadvertently jingoistic, and they expect loyalty from Indians towards India. That's one aspect of it. There are still going to be those that understand what it is to be objective when you're calling the sport, regardless of what nationality you come from. And now, as our times have evolved over the last 4 or 5 years, where we've continued to get more and more polarized through our politics and through the type of politics that's, I don't think, restricted to India at all. I'm sure enough people have said this. It doesn't do justice to say that only India suffers from a hugely polarized societal ideology. It's happening in first world countries. So what it's done is cricket has almost fallen as a natural victim to, or it's almost like collateral damage. The consumption of cricket has also become part of ideological battles. And now, if you are talking about liberal dispensations or opinions that essentially come from an ideology of a liberal ideology versus okay, let me try and rephrase that to make it a little clearer. Basically, there have become that, like in everything else, in every other type of content, you also now have cricket content which is viewed through ideological lenses. So you have the fan that wants the commentator to be really passionate about India, that wants him to be part of the Indian, be the Indian in him, because that's something that appeals to him. So naturally, the channel is going to want to market to that fan because that is his consumer. It's a direct sales to return, it's a direct selling point to the customer. Whereas if I'm listening or if you're listening, maybe you would want somebody to be objective and you would want a Nasir Hussain to be extremely good on commentary, whether it's India, England, and whether Owen Morgan's hit the six or whether Virat Kohli's hit it. The same for an Ian Bishop, who can continue to hold the audience's attention whether West Indies beat England or whether they heartbreakingly lose to a New Zealand in a World Cup. That's what we enjoy. As you extend that deeper and deeper, you're starting to see that every opinion of yours in cricket is only going to either serve an entire set of people or not serve an entire set of people at the same time. So my big dilemma is, can you keep these issues outside of the sport? And earlier, I did an interview with a Pakistan news channel about 2 years back. I think it was right after this incident. This was last year, because India Australia, the camouflage incident, the army caps. And I was asked about it, and I simply said, I don't think it's on, because I don't believe that the sporting field is a place for political gesturing. And then cricket has had that in the past. Moeen Ali was pulled up for wearing a Free Palestine and Save Gaza wristband during the India-England test in 2014. And I just said that if Dhoni had to make a point about supporting the troops, then perhaps that's something that can be made outside the field. Now, India got permission for it because they felt that it's a charitable cause, that he was promoting donating to the defense fund. I can get that, but it was still a political message. However, from that time to now, I've actually thought, can you actually separate politics from the sport? It's all well and good to say there should be no political gesturing or gesticulating in games on the sports field, but I think now we're coming to a point where it's not just politics that are essentially insignificant to our beliefs. मेरी राय में we have come to a point right now कि यार ये जो है जो भी हो रहा है, it's starting to affect people on a very personal and direct level, and therefore they feel that they are within their rights to express an opinion on it.
But don't you think it also depends on how, like, we as a viewer are looking at, like, we don't agree with Dhoni's decision to wear those caps. But what about, there might be something which you might agree with on, like like, for example, you remember Brian Lara's those yellow sleeves that he wore? I think it was the '96 World Cup. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you said you started following from '99.
No, I still know what happened before that. but go on. Yeah.
No, so because that was, I don't remember exactly why he did that, but he was sort of praised for it.
It was some
I
Jamaican
mean, it basically went the other way.
of some,
Yeah.
but yeah, and to add to that, I mean, I have realized something over the years, and this ties back to your old talking point of starting to watch cricket in '99 and watching highlights and all. I'm still not able to watch the highlights of the 2003 World Cup final. It's just something that I just cannot do. I don't know, but as time goes, I can potentially watch the India-New Zealand match from this World Cup, and it doesn't affect me that way. And I have realized that over time I have become less of कि India क्या कर रहा है and more of कि ये Ben Stokes को देखो यार, what amazing things he's doing on the ground. So as an objective word बोल जाओ, as a broadcaster, do you think it is possible for a broadcaster to be partisan and still be a good broadcaster, or even for a lover of sport, like can you just care about how well Virat Kohli plays his cover drives and pulls, and just not like look at Kane Williamson or Steven Smith with the same adoration?
No, I actually think working in the sport at after a point, it in some way detaches you from the emotion of the like you said, the partisan element in some way is reduced. I would say the jingoistic element goes away if you work in the sport. At least when you work in an organization that I worked in. Now, I think that's a bigger aspect because we've never been pushed to try and do India-centric content. Yes, we are all Indians, and therefore, by virtue of being Indian, you will have some level of emotional connect to the team. And we also cater to an audience base which is significantly Indian. So the coverage may be more in terms of the quantity of coverage, but it's never jingoistic to a point. That's something, in fact, that we are discouraged at CricInfo, because we want every fan to feel like CricInfo is a site for them, not if you're in Pakistan that this is an Indian website, or if you're in England that this is an Indian website. So people in England and Australia and New Zealand, CricInfo was founded on the basis of wherever a cricket fan might be and whichever nationality he may be from, he should be able to follow his team on our site. That's why we follow even the most absurd of cricket, wherever it might go on in the most remote parts of the world, we'll have it covered. So I think my organizations had a lot to do with that, where I haven't fallen victim to this rampant jingoism that's captured mainstream media and that to some degree would even capture the sport. But I think it's easy. I also think with what the point that you made, you've not been part of an organization like this, or you don't work in that field, but somewhere you feel कि इतना वो लगाव नहीं है टीम का जो पहले होता था. And I think that just comes in every phase of a cricket watching viewer. I mean, you'll find a number of people who are probably 40, 50 years old saying how they used to get turned on by the way Kapil Dev or Gavaskar or Shrikant used to play, and they don't feel the same anymore with Dhoni and Kohli or whatnot. That's why I said our generation, the identity of cricket to our generation was Tendulkar and Dravid and Lakshman and Ganguly and Sehwag and Kumble. So that was our generation to enjoy. And now we watch the generation. There's a natural byproduct of comparing. This guy Kohli was nothing if Tendulkar would have played in this era with these rules, so he would have had 50,000.
So yeah, my dad actually today, I had the exact same conversation with my dad today, and he was like, KL Rahul bhi to Sachin jaisa khel hi leta hai. And I was like, no, but like he doesn't.
Yeah, but I think it's a very natural way to watch cricket. So I don't think it's actually a hard thing. Objectivity isn't hard. If you are, in fact, all you need is, I think, the right kind of people to guide you on what in your early years as to what your role is as a broadcaster. And for me, it's simple. I don't really look at it as Indian or India centric. When I used to watch cricket and I used to listen to, I think we had a golden
Yeah,
generation of commentary back then. When when I started watching cricket, 90s, 2000s, when you had Bill Lawry and you
all
had
of Channel
Richie
9.
Beno and who've of course been around for 30 years even before that.
Yeah,
All the Channel 9 guys, couple add that to David Gower in England, Tony Cozier in the West Indies, and I would even say Gavaskar and Shastri at that time, who were very,
yeah,
very good. I don't know whether they still hold that, but at that time I used to enjoy listening to Shastri and I used to enjoy listening to Gavaskar. So I just think my education of the game was dependent on the broadcaster. And I used to always leave with whatever the broadcaster said. If he said it was right or wrong, I used to go with that. So I think there's a huge responsibility on the broadcaster. When Trevor Chappell bowled the underarm delivery against New Zealand, the infamous one, Richie Beno absolutely tore into him. Being an Australian, he absolutely tore into
yeah,
him. And there are videos of that on YouTube even today saying that is, in his view, that is absolutely disgraceful. And as I was at that time, I didn't even know Richie Beno when I
yeah,
was sort of watching clips at that time when I was 9, 10, and watching clips of Beno. I didn't even know that Beno was a very successful, very impactful former Australian captain. I just assumed he's only a commentator because he
yeah.
used to be the voice of Cricket 97 and then Cricket 99 and all the video games and computer games. And Beno established himself as a broadcaster with such fierce identity that people forgot about his playing career in some ways. And that's what happens with a good broadcaster. So, according to me, I think being objective is easy if you've got your heart and your mind at the right
But just
place.
as a cricket viewer, like forget the broadcaster part for a bit. Just as a cricket
Hmm.
viewer, have you felt so
Yeah.
your team is my team base in the sense I we are from the same generation almost. So but so do you
Sure.
feel like right now when you watch the Indian cricket team uh,
Hmm.
play let's say the New Zealand team, do you watch it for इंडिया कितना
Yeah.
स्कोर कर रहा है या इंडिया कितने विकेट्स ले रहा है कोहली कैसा खेल रहा है और फॉर द होलिस्टिक and I guess this is not the greatest question to you because you've been more neutral over the time, but I feel there's almost an expectation that when you
Hmm.
watch cricket you'd watch like it's almost become like team cheering. The jingoistic narrative has almost come into cricket as well. Maybe not at ESPN Cricinfo, but if you
Yeah.
see a lot of the news channels, for example, all of the and they are as
Hmm. Hmm.
old or young as you are, and yet there is almost this
Yeah.
cheerleading that is happening, and which maybe is off-putting to me. But is it what the nation really like wants right now?
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? We're living in such a time where there are such stark ideological differences and they affect your consumption habits for everything from news to sport to films to songs to actors to content, and cricket is part of that now. So if I
Hmm.
can't bear cheerleading, like it really, really puts me off. In fact, when someone is blindly and pointlessly just, I mean, there was a time where I'll be fair, some of the commentary that we used to hear from Shastri and when he was first contracted the BCCI had actually become quite unbearable. And even I would say even today, some of the commentary that we do here, I think it's almost like sacrosanct. Dhoni is sacrosanct, Kohli is sacrosanct. Whether if they put a catch down or if they make an error, then all the factors in the world are responsible, but Kohli himself. And Kohli actually drops as much as he takes as well in Test cricket, especially. Which is something nobody will point out. But God forbid, Rishabh Pant misses a stumping, then immediately you're ready to go after him. Or Riddhiman Saha moves a little late, and oh my goodness, look at the amount of things that are wrong with him. Virat Kohli is notorious for overthrows, pointless overthrows. Let's count how many commentators have really drilled into him for that. So my point is that there is no doubt of Virat Kohli's greatness. You don't need to overdo it. And similarly, the same sins need to if you're a decent enough or an objective enough commentator, you should apply the same standards to all your grades. So according to me, it's very nauseating, but I can totally see why do you think former cricketers who've got such great stature still do it? Because कहीं ना कहीं जो लोग देख रहे हैं उनको विराट कोहली के बारे में बुरा सुनना ही नहीं है या धोनी के बारे में बुरा सुनना ही नहीं है. And that is again a result of the times we live in. इनकी फॉलोइंग इतनी ज्यादा हो चुकी है कि चलो कोहली एंड धोनी आर तो आउटराइट ग्रेट्स, वी डोंट इवन नीड टू worry about them. But even a Hardik Pandya or a KL Rahul or an R Ashwin who are still on the, you can't really establish them as all-time greats, nowhere near. Maybe Ashwin to a degree is a test grade, but you try and put something critical of them on social media and they all have an army that are ready to attack you. Right? That is exactly the times that we live in. So that in some ways has started affecting the way commentators comment about these people. If there was a simpler time without social media, without backlash, without hate and abuse, I'd have been very interested to see whether cheerleading would have been as high as it is now.
Just to your commentary point, and we've often talked about it in our own podcast, that
Hmm.
all like if like listening, and there are two aspects to it. So aspect one, let's talk about someone like Sunil Gavaskar, who's been a great of the game undoubtedly, and who has been a great commentator as well. But over time, there are certain things, just say when you mentioned, right, that you met that lady at AIR and you thought, oh my god, lady, right? Certain things that he does while commentating could be classified as all mildly almost racist, I'd say, like making that accent, if you know what I'm talking about, right? So that's one aspect. Do you feel that there should, I don't know, like people slowly should be phased out, or there should be some kind of training of how like things have changed over time? That is one thing. The second thing is especially for the 2020 cricket commentary. We've talked about this. We feel that it's very out of tune with how the cricket is played and how the commentary is done. Like we still see people like L. Shivaramakrishnan say things like he needs to hold the fort. Like in 2020 cricket, these concepts should be like completely meaningless.
Yeah, they basically try and scale down 50-50, right? I mean, the 50.
As an objective viewer, not a broadcaster, your reflections on the
Hmm.
current commentary scene when it comes to specifically 2020 and the example that I gave you, and also about the overall
Yeah.
Sunil Gavaskar example.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, let me address the first part of your question first regarding someone like Gavaskar. I think I don't believe in phasing people out purely on age, because I think I can still listen to Michael Holding for a long time. Yeah, I can listen to some of the most popular commentators from the World Cup were Ian Smith and Ian Bishop, both of whom you could argue are from an era well before 2020 and well before, there are far younger and voices and more dynamic voices, but they're easily some of the best that we've seen. So I think a natural passion and if you have the right skill set and you're still managing to hone that skill set and captivate an audience, then I see nothing wrong in you carrying on for as long as you want to. But as far as if you're not being able to, I just think it takes a lot of it takes conviction on part of those who hire you to take such calls. And the other thing is that there should also, in my view, be suitable alternatives available for you. So if Gavaskar is the best of what's available, then I can understand you going on with him a bit longer. And I still think Gavaskar adds value when he talks about Test cricket. When he talks about batting in Test cricket, I think there's still a lot of value that he brings in. I totally agree on one point that T20 is a completely different beast, and I would say most former cricketers of a certain era do not get it. They also refuse to accept, firstly, that it's a different beast. The role, if you see more and more people that are actually connected with T20 cricket directly, either people who are playing that game today or those who've coached successfully. And I've had the privilege of working with the likes of Stephen Fleming and Mike Hussey and Daniel Vittori, all of whom have worked with top level franchises, T20 franchises around the world, and even played the shortest format. And they themselves will tell you, someone like Dan Vittori or Stephen Fleming, who played the very first T20 game ever played, to now will tell you how much T20 cricket has changed. Even in this short span of the shortest format being around, how much it's changed in terms of just, it's far more tactical, it's far more insightful. In fact, it's one of the most, it's perhaps the one sport, the one format that requires the most knowledgeable commentary. Whereas Test cricket, you can rely on a foundation of understanding and then build from there. So I completely agree that 2020, some people don't get it. Like, I'll give you a small example. As with the India-Bangladesh game, the one that we lost, the one in Delhi, I think Shikhar Dhawan got 40 at a runner ball.
Mhm.
He was India's top scorer. I put out a tweet that day as well, because again, it was Dhawan doing Dhawan things. I get it was a hard pitch and whatnot, but Shreyas Iyer had come in the same game and whacked some 29 of 13 or 29 of 12, right? And he'd given the innings real impetus. Then he's gotten run out, right? At 40 or 41, Dhawan's gotten run out. I don't remember who the batsman was at the receiving end.
Yeah.
And Mr. Gavaskar, due respect to him, has gone on and
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, it's the set batsman. That's how. That's completely."
Yeah.
40 or 41 in T20 cricket is not set. It's a struggling batsman.
Yeah.
It's something as straightforward as now. I have had the privilege of meeting Gavaskar a number of times, and I hold him in the highest of regards because of the player that he was and the broadcaster that he was for very many years. But that is something which he will never agree to. Even if I tell him that, sir, this is not a batsman who's well set.
Yeah.
This is a batsman who's struggling at 40 or 41. You'd rather have him out. And, and he will never agree with that because he will have his own thing. Oh, no, but he could have made up for it had he waited longer. He can tee off later. So these are these old 50 over concepts, like you say, that if you can start slow and make it up, then you're fine. And and you know how costly that has been. India have too many of those players. Finally, even India have learned how to play 2020 cricket. They changed the way they played in the third T20 against the West Indies recently. And then where is your school of thought? Suddenly you're thinking flat pitch, 190, 200 won't be enough, and that's what I'm going to get if I go 10 of 10 and then make up for it later. What if you don't? And you can't afford to do 10 of 10 anymore. You hit 20 of 10 and get someone else in.
Later in T20.
Absolutely. And I think
that are gone, yeah.
And I think you guys are illustrating exactly the point that it's not only those in the game, it's those fans watching with reasonable amount of intelligence who will also get that. So you need to service the fans then. And if the fans are smarter than you, then what are you doing in the broadcaster's chair? As simple as that. So that's something that cricket, I think 2020 cricket has realized that more and more. I don't think all 2020 cricket has. I'd be very curious to see what the World T20 commentary panel is going to be. I must give the ICC credit. I thought the World Cup last year, the commentary panel I think they picked was really, really good. It was an excellent mix of the very best from most parts of the world. You will always have the odd name or two that you wouldn't want there, but that's okay. I think by and large their intent was really good. They had a good mix of non-players as well. Alison Mitchell was part of that team. Harsha himself was in it. If you had to pick some of the better commentators, they were there. So according to me, the landscape of broadcast is also changing slowly, and that's something you're seeing even in Fox with its renewed, refreshed coverage of Australian cricket. They've got guys like Mark Howard there, guys that have been. Yeah. Kerry O'Keefe is essentially known as a radio commentator, and he's not really known for his cricketing skills. He's known because he's an entertaining storyteller. So I think the landscape of cricket is changing, and sooner or later the BCCI will jump onto it. So if you're not enjoying their commentary right now, I know enough people who message me and tell me English commentary on the BCCI feed or the India cricket feed has become so drab. That's why they're switching over to Hindi. That's why they're watching other. And I understand that. I think it's far too much of the same, and it's failed to reinvent itself. But it will come when there is more personality in the commentary box. So let's hope that happens sooner.
I mean, although India has the most number of viewers, but the coverage around some series, especially, when it's England or Australia, they're playing somewhere else. Like they have these segments, like for example, polite inquiries, right?
Sure.
So I was just wondering why don't they seem to do it much better? I think when compared to Indian, the coverage of Indian series. I mean, so do you know why that? Like, is there? Do you think that the viewers are not going to like that format? Something like a polite inquiries when it comes to India, South Africa.
No, I don't see any reason why India. In fact, I did polite inquiries when India were in South Africa early 2017, and it actually did pretty well. I did with my South African colleague Firdaus Munda. Yeah. I think it's just about having the right people to do it. Polite inquiries built a good reputation on our platform because of the way George Dobell and Jared Kimber and Melinda Farrell used to do it, and they really, Jared especially, along with George, who essentially founded it, they established a really good tempo and a temperament to that show. Yeah. But that having been said, the viewership for Australia-England polite inquiries vis-a-vis the India-South Africa one, for instance, there was a significant difference.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that even the India-South Africa one did pretty well in some ways, but there are elements like filming it from the ground added a real charm to it. If you just sit in a room and do polite inquiries, it doesn't have the same feel. Every now and
Melinda and Jared did it during the World Cup as well. I think the T20 World Cup, and they were not even doing it from the ground. They were like walking. Like a couple of episodes were just like
but then that was perhaps just outside the perhaps just outside the ground or just doing it on. But it had developed an identity for it. Look, I mean, polite inquiries is essentially what it's not some fantastic new concept. It's basically taking people's questions on Twitter. Right? Yeah. So I'm just saying that I would love for the broadcast of Indian cricket to also reinvent itself in some ways like that. There should be a digital presence for Indian cricket that that is actually run and initiated by the BCCI, because they've taken charge of the production of cricket. They've gotten a lot better with their social media game. Let's be fair. Some of the stuff that the BCCI boys put out on digital is actually pretty good when they get into the locker room, in the dressing room, and whatnot. Yeah, they've got some good stuff now. I think the really good stuff comes out from the franchises, because they really engage in social media interaction during the IPL. So they come up with some really good stuff. But I think until you don't add a little more, this whole concept of just taking questions, it's going to be largely dependent on who's answering it then. And that's a very limited formula for a show to succeed. What you want is wider avenues to try and make a show interesting for an Indian audience. So in an Indian cricket case, I would say that if we knew that every now and then we could get an Indian cricketer on a polite inquiries, that would make it so much more interesting. Let's say we could have Rohit Sharma or Jasprit Bumrah or Shikhar Dhawan or Hardik Pandya or Virat Kohli with us, and we could poke some fun at him. What if we poked Shikhar's strike rate with him as an issue and he had a laugh about it? But can you imagine that? You probably can't. Can you imagine telling Virat Kohli, "Aap slip mein itna hilte kyun ho, yaar Virat? Why can't you stand straight in slips?" It's never going to happen, because that's just not the temperament of Indian cricketers. So then when you get them on a show, you're only going to be obliged to ask them very straight, jacketed questions. Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to say. It's a very different way that we consume a lot of I'm sure all of us. I'm sure we consume a lot more English content online than we do Indian-made content. We don't watch Hindi soap operas. Maybe now with the digital age, we started watching a lot more Indian content online. But essentially, our growing up years have been influenced by content produced from outside India, because that's just something we enjoy more. So I think the same examples apply to even the content we enjoy.
Which is a
around,
great point, because
around
we've been talking about broadcast and how essentially how Australian or English broadcast has comparatively been better than Indian broadcast. Something that and the India Bangladesh game that you talked about, I think the biggest example of the Indian approach to 2020 was the 2016 semi-final against Sri Lanka, where Rahane made that, like, we made 192 for 3, and then no, it was West Indies. Sorry, West Indies. Yes,
West Indies.
but that game was like really the
Yeah.
greatest example of how wrong the Indian cricket. But sometimes I think
Absolutely.
because there has been almost this insulation of Indian cricket to outside influence, right? Like now we have our coach who's Indian. The support staff is largely Indian. Sometimes I think what we listen in the broadcast by people like Gavaskar or Shiv Ramakrishnan, and what plannings are happening within the team are same. Like, and because we have no outside influence, there is almost a lack of desire to change anything, because they know that our top three are great. If they get going, they get going, and that's how we'll approach every game. So and you can see the same thing happening in broadcast as well. I mean, even in IPL, the stumps lighting up came from Big Bash, right? A lot of these innovations come from happen in Big Bash and then come into Indian cricket. Do you think that the overall insulation that we have had in BCCI, which I again can't help but tie back to the overall jingoism that I often see with Indian cricket and India as a whole, has kind of fed into this like self-serving narrative where our approach is the best and there is nobody even there to tell you that, hey, maybe there is something else that you could try. Broadcasting and playing cricket.
Okay. So I think firstly, I don't want to be overly harsh on the Indian broadcast setup, because I think a lot of broadcast setups are as guilty of the same crime. If you talk to a lot of people who watch cricket in South Africa and watch it on SuperSport, you'll find a significant amount of pro-Proteas commentary from there as well, with the odd exception. Even with Australia, to a large degree, there's a mix of broadcasts, but there's still for very many years, even Channel 9 was accused of being extreme. Mark Taylor and Healy were considered to be, absolute cheerleaders. Whereas you could look at Bill Lawry and Ian Chappell as exceptions, but Taylor, Healy, Michael Slater, they were all considered to be as as jingoistic as you could get. So it's been a problem of individuals more than about a systemic issue with Indians. I don't remember the cheerleading being so bad when Shastri and Gavaskar or even Sanjay in the late 90s, early 2000s.
It was not.
There are n number of points. Right. Sanjay was very notoriously, in fact, Sanjay infamously was known to completely back Rahul Dravid's decision at the time to declare when Tendulkar was on 294. So, oh, sorry, 194. So at that point, you still had a very different environment. Now, coming to what it is now, I don't think insularity is as much of an issue, because you look at all these players, they must be with Ravi Shastri around the year, but all of them play with some of the top IPL coaches every single year. MS Dhoni's had such a huge influence of Stephen Fleming, I'm sure, in all the years that he's played. So too Virat Kohli, with all the many, many coaches that have been at RCB. And also you play with foreign captains. You share the dressing room with players that have won the World T20, that have been successful in T20 cricket around the world. So it's not like we live in a world which has barriers to a point with which we can't accept and adapt to changing T20 techniques. I think the problem was that cricket is so heavily captain oriented that it has to come from your captain. And because of the way T20 cricket is changing, you need to have a captain who kind of a captain and a coach. I wouldn't put it only on the captain. I'd say your top management has to be in keeping with that. And you can see that in franchise cricket, because you can see players play very differently in franchise cricket at times. Right? At many points, you could say that someone like Tom Moody was pretty much the boss at Sunrisers. Or Ricky Ponting is pretty much the boss at Delhi Capital. It's not Shreyas Iyer, it's not Bhuvaneshwar Kumar. So at that point, you can see who's calling the shots. Now, it's almost like the football style managerial system, where if you don't play that certain way, then the manager has the authority to literally pull you out. Now, cricket, because it's essentially been a captain-oriented sport, it becomes very hard actually for a guy who's in the field, at that time on field, to take these calls, which is why I think gradually we will see over time that the entire dynamic of T20 cricket will change and will become far more coach-oriented, manager-oriented. I won't be surprised if in the next 5 years, I don't be surprised in the next 5 years, we see international teams appoint a separate director or manager for T20 cricket, who will be different from the head coach of the national side. The head coach of the national side is a very, almost like in India especially, it's a very pointless role. It's got no real authority or power, whereas at least in the case of Australia, the head coach has a position on selection. He has a say on selecting as well. Misbah has made himself to every possible
he's the King
power in
of Pakistan
cricket. Yeah, so precisely. So he's going to review himself and appoint himself and promote and demote himself. So that's different. But my point is that once if you see that happening, maybe there will genuinely be a change in the way T20 cricket is played. As far as other aspects go, with regards to the quality of the coverage, I think there are a fair amount of things that happen for the first time, even with the BCCI. The BCCI first. I mean, this
no ball. That's the one thing.
Front foot no balls.
I can think of. Yeah.
I mean, that's one good thing that's happened. As far as the LED bails go, brilliant innovation from the Big Bash, and it's only about money. The minute the minute it was there, the Indian team just jumped onto it, immediately. I think as far as the overall package goes, until we don't inject a little bit of freshness in India's coverage of cricket, there will always be a little. There will be a slight. You almost reach a point of stagnation as a viewer, where you're expecting to see, hear, and the same things. That having been said, you could see the way the cricket is changing, and now it's almost become too late for India to. I mean, it's become impossible for India to ignore the way T20 cricket is played. So change is going to come as far as elements of viewing the game with more interest goes. I think that's just going to come from.
I almost feel, and again, I love Kohli, but I almost feel that it had someone like Ashwin been the captain, there would have been more. But again, I mean, that's for a separate discussion altogether.
Yeah, I also always maintain that Ashwin gets T20. He surely does. Yeah.
I think Ashwin gets T20, but I don't think Ashwin gets that he doesn't automatically get a place in a T20 side. So those are two different elements. So he could very well be an excellent non-playing captain. He might become a very successful IPL coach in the future. But Ashwin, the T20 bowler, is, according to me, not a sure shot. Maybe on certain games you might play him. So I think it's a comment you can't really go too hard one way or the other. I think Virat Kohli's captaincy in its initial days was filled with flaws. Tactical flaws, selection flaws. I still believe that there were selection flaws in this team right up until the World Cup semi-final, which I think cost us or cost India. And Rohit Sharma has proven himself to be a more astute T20 captain, but that's not to say Rohit Sharma's captaincy has been void of errors. He too has made some strange calls. If I sort of pinpoint them, you find my Twitter feed filled with it. But people believe I'm a pro-Rohit and anti-Kohli sort of guy, because again, that's the time we live in. It's nothing to do with that. I think Kohli's become a much sharper international captain now. Yeah, there's that too. Yeah, there's that. So anyway, so I think Kohli's become a much better captain, but I still think T20 cricket's going to be hard for a captain to be on top of it. He needs help, and I think this building rapport between Kohli and Rohit now, which I think is finally moved beyond all
Mhm.
the backroom talk of how the two don't get along. I think it's only going to help Indian cricket because the two of them together will be a far greater force than either of
We've
them
dissed
individually.
we've dissed broadcasting a lot, but I was just, as you were talking about all this, I was just thinking, I don't know, like if you've seen this on clips, and this is to both of you actually. Like, uh, do you guys remember Shaz and Vaz? Like, what was that? What was that?
Yeah, yeah, of
Like,
course.
like in 2019, I cannot imagine anything like that happening. And also, like, and that was Star, but I don't know who was the broadcasters, like product producers on that. But
Yeah, it was a star concept, ESPN star
and
when they
even
were
before
together with
that,
the joint venture there.
have any of you ever seen Mahatma Kote, or do you know what Mahatma Kote is? Do you remember? Have you heard of it?
You lost
So,
me. You lost me
so,
on
so
this one.
this is
I
something
remember
that you
Shaz
have
and
to do
Baz
after
vividly.
we are done with this episode. Go on YouTube and check what is Mahatma. So basically, in the early 90s, when India would tour Australia, which was rare, there was this character that was developed by the Channel 9. Um, and it was an ex-cricketer actually. I'm forgetting his name. Greg Ritchie. Greg Ritchie was the cricketer. He would dress up as a Sardar,
Okay. Yeah.
brown faced Sardar, and he would do like pitch reports and stuff, and he would call himself as Mahatma Kote. It was like, like there has been nothing as racist in cricket before or after.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I mean, the
but
different times, right?
it's,
You
this is
you learned a
something
lot
that
more
I
over the years.
strongly recommend you to go and see on YouTube. Mahatma Kote, Kote with the C.
Yeah, so I know I just before we close, I just had uh, one thing to ask. Like, it's pretty evident from Ronak's Twitter timeline that he admires Ian Bishop and Ian Smith.
And Ian Chappell also, I
Um,
guess.
but
The Ians
yeah,
It's
but
just
he
an
has
Indian thing.
stopped broadcasting. Yeah. But do you have any other favorites, like
beyond them.
other
I mean,
than
I think
beyond
there
the?
are a lot of good commentators, man. Nasser Hussain and Mike Atherton remain some of the best all-round commentators you listen to.
Hmm.
There's a good story on them actually. When you remember in 2014 when India won that Lord's Test, they went 1-0
Yeah.
up in the series. Ishant got seven. And after that it was coming in the back of tremendous pressure on Alistair Cook's captaincy, and Nasser Hussain in the post-match, or I think it was Michael Atherton in the post-match presentation, who asked Alistair Cook, is your captaincy under pressure? Like, this is a man who is the Sky Sports main presenter, main commentator, one of their top commentators, who's on an ECB broadcast at home at a Lord's Test, asking the England captain,
Mhm.
is his captaincy under pressure? Is his captaincy under threat? Can you imagine the same scenario in India if it ever came to that with an Indian commentator? And it was a very interesting one because it was so nonchalant. And Alistair Cook's reply to it also was, it was not like he was shocked or stunned or offended by the question. So I remember this time that I followed up on this with some of the Indian commentators that I interact with, and I asked them, "Do you remember that game?" And as it turns out, Sanjay told me this story, and he's saying that he met Michael Atherton and said, "Well done. How do you guys do that? And if we ask that kind of question, tomorrow you never know if we might lose our job." So Michael Atherton had a lovely response. He says, "If I don't ask that question, Sanjay, I might lose
That
my job." So it's just entirely it's such a different. It pretty much sums up the way broadcasters look at what their priorities are, and it's such a poignant and simple way to illustrate what's required in our system of broadcast in comparison to what's
this is
already
almost
there
going back full circle because
otherwise.
we initially talked about the First Amendment, and I think it's basically this idea in the society that that nobody is above criticism or nobody is above questioning, which I think we are still Raja Praja mentality. We still have it. I don't know how it will go. Just to add to that, Ronak, I mean, I'd love to have you on the political podcast and just talk about your thoughts on current political systems and structures.
Sure, I'd be more than happy
One
to.
of these days for sure. So, so I think
Sure.
you've been a great great guest to have. We've talked, meandered a lot.
My
Um,
pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, no, we are.
no,
Sorry
it,
about
it
that.
meandered in all good places. Like this is like this has been an amazing discussion. So
Okay.
usually before we end, we ask our guests um, anything that they'd recommend. It could be a book that you are reading. It could be a Netflix or like Amazon show that you've recently seen. But anything that you've really enjoyed and you'd want our listeners to give it a try as well.
Or any ex-Pakistani cricketer's YouTube channel.
Oh, that's a whole. I don't know if you follow that.
Okay, let me.
That was our AMR discussion.
Are you talking about
There is a whole
Ramiz's? Are you
world,
talking about
Ronak.
Ramiz's
There is
YouTube
I mean,
channel?
there is Jamil, there is Rashid.
I've seen a lot of Ramiz's YouTube videos.
Ramiz
I find them
is
very
Ramiz is
entertaining.
the
Actually, I
cream.
enjoy
Okay,
watching
there is
them.
this whole world where Salman Butt, Danish Kaneria, Basit Ali, Faisal Iqbal, all of
Oh
them have their
wow.
own YouTube channels. And the thing is that all of them just talk about India. That is how like the market has.
Yeah, they actually covered
So
the Syed Mushtaq
yeah,
Ali, right?
one of them covered the
Uh,
Sayyid Mushtaq Ali
when
Trophy. Can you
Pakistan finished
imagine?
playing, they
Like
actually covered.
that's a whole different universe that I don't know if you're missing on or not, but like I mean we love cringe, so for just a cringe
Hmm.
fulfillment we watch that. I mean there's there's a Rashid Latif's channel called Caught Behind. There's Shoaib Akhtar's channel called 100 Miles Per Hour.
Hmm.
There's Inzamam's channel called Match Winner. I could just keep.
So you have to watch Inzamam's channel. You have to watch at least one. Just you know, just as he used to have the lazy elegance when he was batting,
Hmm.
he has the exact
and
same
and
thing on
then
his
one
channel.
day he invited Mushtaq Ahmed on his channel, and they were both like it was like they're sitting on a throne of some sort, and they were talking. हमारे ज़माने में हम जाते थे tour पे. It's like it's a different kind of comedy that अभी India में I don't know. So basically, and this is a whole different topic. We can talk about it later. But I don't know if you've noticed, but there is this whole industry that has popped
Hmm.
up of white people reviewing trailers of
Yeah.
Bollywood movies, and these videos have like millions of views from Indians on YouTube. And similarly, if you allow me 2-3 minutes, this was my theory. So my theory is this: when 2014 elections happened, before and after that, a lot of YouTube channels popped up, like Nation with Namo, Modi, random YouTube channels, and their focus was basically to see Pakistani media and see what they are saying about Modi, because somehow we are just infatuated by Pakistan. I don't know. And these videos got like thousands of views. One of these random guys started watching a PTV show called Game On Hai. And India, like I think this is around the 20, like around that time Asia Cup, and of course this show India was playing well, so they were praising India. So they'd cut off these sections where people like Shoaib Akhtar or Rashid Latif would praise India, and they'll put it on their channels and like Rashid Latif का कहना है कि कोहली हमें बहुत मारेगा, it like headings like that, right? And these videos also started getting a lot of views.
Hmm.
So I'm sure someone from Pakistan or the Middle East realized that there is a chance to make paisa from this. So they started downloading all of Game On episodes from PTV and upload the full episodes on YouTube. And then someone, Rashid Latif and Noman Niazi, who are the anchor of these this show, they must have realized कि Dr. Noman Niazi. Anyway, so they were like, we are selling, boys. So they just started these YouTube channels then they just came out of PTV and they started YouTube channels, and seeing how
Hmm.
successful they were, Shoaib Akhtar started his own channel. Like right now, it's like sometime. So we have a WhatsApp group of for this podcast, right, where the three of us talk about materials,
Hmm.
and we were doing like a calculation, and I think so it is like Fazal Iqbal has a YouTube channel. Like it takes people a minute to even realize who Fazal Iqbal is, or Tanveer Haider, who played like one test match. He has a YouTube channel. So and the interesting thing is that all of them focus on how India is playing, which is fascinating. I I mean मैं इसके बारे में मतलब endless बात कर सकता हूँ, but like इसके बारे में कुछ एक news article होना
Yeah.
चाहिए, but
And the tables have turned, right? Like we used to admire their fast bowlers when we were growing up. It's the other way
a
around
lot
now.
of it is
Of
compulsion
course.
also, I feel, because and this goes to our broadcasting thing, right? They've realized that Indians like people praising them, and so they've like thoda like I
Hmm.
mean, all due respect, but Shardul Thakur is still like needs a long way, but उन लोग शार्दुल वो तो बैटिंग भी कर लेता है. अरे भाई रुक जाओ, 2 शॉट ही मारे हैं उसने. So it's a whole world out there. But anyway, that I'll ping you a few YouTube links on Twitter so that you could
Um,
properly enjoy them.
yeah, but
More than well. I can't wait to have a look at some of
you still
these.
have to recommend something. We just digress.
So yeah, I mean, let me put it this way: if I have to recommend the best cricket book that I've read, I think it goes to Nasser Hussain's autobiography, Playing with Fire. I'm sure a lot of hardcore cricket fans might have read. It's probably the best, most honest cricket book that you will read, and it's hugely entertaining as well. If I am to recommend a writer who I genuinely enjoy reading just about every time, his name's Andrew Fernando. He is a Sri Lanka correspondent for CricInfo. And Andrew Fernando is absolute poetry and just the right element of everything, including the perfect pinch of humor, no matter what he's writing on. You could be reading Andrew Fernando about a game or a game that you've not watched or a player that you don't care about, and it'll still be worth your time. So I think that's someone that I would always recommend if you happen to come across these articles. And I would always
Of
recommend that you watch
course,
ESPNCricinfo ahead of any other cricket
that is a given.
segments.
And with that, I will wrap this episode. Thanks, guys.
BSNL Chowka, connecting India.